It's 1945. The Allied forces have won the war in Europe, and victory against Imperial Japan seems not far away. And against this backdrop, the first general election for 10 years is called for the 5th of July that year. In this election, there wasn't really any party that had the advantage, or disadvantage depending on your opinion, of being the incumbent. This is because during the war Churchill had formed a unity government with all the other major parties, so technically everyone was an incumbent. However, the largest party, and the Prime Minister's party, was the Conservatives, with the main opposition being Labour, with the Liberals and National Liberals being third and fourth biggest parties. The biggest issue going into the election was what sort of country people wanted after the war, with much of this being shaped by a document written in 1942 called the Beveridge Report, which advocated the idea of cradle-to-the-grave support and the creation of a welfare state and national health service. The Conservatives, however, were still considered by many to be the favourites at the start of the election. This was because of the immense personal popularity of Churchill, which is what they focused their campaign on, with slogans like "Help him finish the job," while also backing some progressive policies, but were vague about the details. But the party struggled, as aside from Churchill, the party itself was unpopular, due to pre-war policies such as appeasement, which many senior figures had supported. There was also the memory of the Great Depression, when conservative economic policy had not supported the unemployed and led to protests across the country. The Labour campaign was different in that it focused its efforts on promoting radical social and economic changes. These policies were full adoption of the ideas of the Beveridge Report and called for nationalisation of major industries and utilities, a welfare state, national health service, and economic planning to improve the economy. Though there were a large number of third parties around at this election, the only two notable ones were the Liberals and National Liberals, who both essentially were standing up as moderate versions of Labour and the Conservatives respectively. The campaign in this election was clearly won by Labour, running an energetic campaign, of which the most notable event being a Labour candidate quite literally canvassing number 10 Downing Street, while the Conservatives completely failed to connect to the public, with the worst moment being when Winston Churchill made a speech saying Labour would have to fall back on some kind of Gestapo to fulfil its policies. But the Conservatives were still hopeful of victory due to Churchill's popularity, and although Labour were ahead in the polls, nobody predicted a working majority for them. The country went to the polls on the 5th of July, but the results were not counted till the votes of soldiers overseas were transported home. And the results? A landslide victory for Labour, with them winning 393 seats, giving them a majority of 72, making their leader Clement Attlee the second ever Labour Prime Minister and the first with a working majority. The Conservatives' result was worse than anyone predicted, having lost almost half their seats, only winning 197, with the most notable loss being the seat of Harold Macmillan, but he did re-enter the House after winning the Bromley by-election later that year. This election was even worse for third parties, with both the Liberals and National Liberals leaders losing their seats, with the Liberals losing 9 seats, but things were much worse for the National Liberals, as they lost 21 seats. This pretty much killed the party, with them emerging with the Conservatives 2 years later. This election set the stage for the next 3 decades of British politics, with the two-party plus system being created, with the third parties declining, especially the Liberals. The Labour government would possibly be the most radical in its history, with the railways and utilities and major industries being nationalised. It also saw the creation of the National Health Service, with Health Minister Aneurin Bevan becoming a leading figure in the left. See you in 1950 for the next election.